Good evening from New York. The fear in the wake of Thursday's stunning Supreme Court ruling that corporations can spend unlimited amounts of cash on campaign ads has been that instead of, say, the senator from Delaware or the congressman from Maine, the people of this nation could soon be represented by the senator from Delta or the congressman from MetLife, as if they are not currently. Today, expressing that fear, the chief executives of Delta and MetLife, among many other CEOs, tired of the fundraising calls they have already been getting from lawmakers, and after the court's precedent-setting decision, now afraid it could get a lot worse and soon. After yesterday's decision by the court, more than 36 U.S. executives today sending a letter to congressional leaders with this message: stop hitting us up for campaign cash, and a request that lawmakers approve public financing for the House and Senate campaigns. Their letter reading in part: members of Congress already spend too much time raising money from large contributors, and often many of us individually are on the receiving end of solicitation phone calls from members of Congress. With additional money flowing into the system due to the court's decision, the fundraising pressure on members of Congress will only increase. Among those signing the letter, current or former executives of Delta Airlines, MetLife, toy maker Hasbro, ice cream maker Ben & Jerry's, the Seagram's Liquor Company, Men's Warehouse, Quaker Chemical, Playboy Enterprises, Brita, San Diego National Bank, and Crate & Barrel. Meanwhile, the Center for Public Integrity asking today, what about foreign companies? The CPI saying that the Supreme Court might have cleared the way for foreign-owned multinationals like the Venezuelan-owned Citgo Petroleum Company to pump money into U.S. campaigns in an attempt to influence the outcome of our elections. Wonder how the Hugo Chavez-hating Republicans might feel about that. Republican campaign lawyer Ben Ginsberg from Bush v. Gore and his colleagues at one of D.C.'s top lobbying firms warning in a memo today that unless the laws change, the political party as we know it is threatened with extinction. With the limits on the amounts and sources of funds they can accept, the parties will be bit players compared to outside groups that can now conduct those core functions with unlimited funds from any source. So if you have been harboring dreams that now might be the time to create a viable, electable third-party alternative, I guess we're supposed to be grateful for the two political parties we've got, or as long as we've still got them. Congressman James Clyburn, the majority whip, using the word corpocracy to describe how our government might devolve, saying in a statement that the Supreme Court has now opened floodgates that will allow special interest money to overrun our elections and turn our democracy into a corpocracy. As a result of this divisive ruling, insurance monopolies will have undue influence over your health care, fat cats on Wall Street will control your money, and big oil will wreak havoc upon the environment. Congressman Clyburn joins us now. Great, thanks for your time tonight, sir.
Thank you so much for having me, Keith.
You've used this word corpocracy. What would, in your estimation, a corpocracy look like, and what about it should voters most fear?
Well, if you were to look this word up, you had a hard time finding it in various dictionaries, but Google it, look it up, and what you will find is that it is a government that is controlled by conglomerates, corporates, and many of them even with private entities. It is as clear to me as anything I've ever read anywhere that this opens the door, this ruling, this Supreme Court decision opens the door to a corpocracy in our society.
As we mentioned, some chief executives writing congressional leadership today that they were already tired of being viewed as, ATMs for campaigns, and the corporations that they represent are asking for public financing of House and Senate campaigns. As a member of the leadership, what's your reply to that idea and where it comes from?
Well, I think it opens the door for a couple of other things as well. I think you mentioned it at the beginning of the program. We could very well see foreign corporations having undue pressure on our trade policies. I can see now these fair trade or open trade agreements that aren't so fair being influenced by this sort of thing. But also, I believe very strongly that we need to sit down now and take a hard look at campaign finance reform that will include public financing of campaigns, because if we don't, you will see too many people elected to office feeling beholden to these contributors, not so much because of the money that they give to them, but the kind of money that can now go out and spend against them. All of us know that if you say anything 10, 12, maybe 14 times, somebody's going to believe it. And if you've got big corporations spending money against people, you will see people redefined in the media in a way that's far beyond the truth, and that will be very, very bad for our system. People will be intimidated by that kind of a process, and you will see bad government coming out of Washington, and that would be horrible for the American people.
Do you think there's enough bipartisanship to act quickly? Because obviously you'll have to act quickly because the gates have been open and the money is already there on the other side. But I mean, if Ben Ginsburg, who, as I pointed out, was one of the lawyers for Mr. Bush in Bush v. Gore in 2000, is warning that political parties are threatened with extinction, A, what does the fact that he said that mean symbolically? And B, how do you combat what he's talking about?
Well, he's underscoring what I've been saying. If you render the political parties as we know them to be extinct, I don't understand why a third party would be any different from the two parties we've got now. What you will have is all the parties being neutered, corpocracy being the order of the day. That, to me, cries out for some bipartisan consultation in the very near future. Now, if you look at all of the reactions to this, my Republican friends seem to be very, very happy with this decision, maybe with one or two exceptions, one being Senator McCain seemed to call this decision sort of disappointing, I think is the word that he used. But I really believe that we need to get our heads together and do something to ameliorate the damage that's being caused, that's going to be caused by the Supreme Court decision.
Congressman James Clyburn of South Carolina, the Majority Whip, always insightful and always a pleasure. Great thanks for your time, sir.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Always. For more on what might be done to fix the mess wrought by the Supreme Court, let's turn now to Bob Edgar, the president of Common Cause. Thank you for your time tonight, sir.
It's good to be with you, Keith.
First off, your reaction to this ruling, where does this rank among Supreme Court decisions?
This is the Super Bowl of bad decisions. I agreed with your comments last night. After looking and reading and looking at the detail of this decision, I think it sets us back 100 years. It gives corporate power so much power. It's hard to believe that your viewers don't already know that the housing crisis, the investment crisis, the banking crisis, and this whole year where we talked about health care wasn't already corroded by the amount of money that corporations and labor unions and others have already put into the system. This is like adding to that, putting money on steroids and adding money on top of money on top of money. And I think the congressman is right. This is a game changer. And I think it's time for us now, after we've agonized for 24 hours, to have people like you and others who are watching tonight to begin a campaign to change the playing field. I knew Dr. Martin Luther King just 5 weeks before he was assassinated. He wrote a book called Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community. I think if we really want community, we're going to have to move through the chaos of the Supreme Court's decision, and we're going to have to find specific ways to rein in corporate expenditures. If we don't, our children and grandchildren are going to have a very different nation. For example, Keith, a congressman votes wrong on the health bill or on some banking issue, moves in, particularly in rural districts, and puts $5 or $10 or $15 million in to recycle that congressman simply because they voted wrong, or puts that money in support of a candidate that they think will serve their corporate interest. I think it's a very dangerous precedent that they've set, thinking that corporations are persons. I think there's a real difference. Corporations may be thought of as persons, but I don't think all of them have a heart.
Yeah, and they shouldn't get all the votes, in essence. How much time do we have before they do, in fact, get all the votes?
Well, I think we've got to start urgently now to put some legislative constraints on. My guess is that the 2010 midterm election, you're going to see money being spent. And I'd say this, Keith, it's not just the money, it's the fear. If you're a large corporation, say you're Boeing Vertol or you're Wall Street, you just walk into a congressman's office and say, you know, I watched this vote, and this vote. I've got a pocket full of money that I'm going to put in against you if you don't change your opinion. That fear factor is very powerful.
And now it is very legal. Bob Edgar, the president of Common Cause. Great thanks.
It's great to be with you, Keith.
Mr. Edgar was involved in getting top officials from the 2008 Obama campaign and the 2008 McCain campaign to call, author an op-ed decrying this pernicious ruling. That's how pernicious it really is. And yet watch TV news, listen to radio, read the internet left and right, and the potential impact of the society-changing ruling was not only not estimated, the ruling itself was barely covered.